request everybody to mute their phones if possible and turn off their videos. Thank you. So today we'll talk about representational systems and predicates. This is an important topic. And what this does is basically whatever we have learned in the last couple of sessions, it brings them all together, right? How we can utilize everything that we have been learning and how that really makes, we can utilize everything and start creating the impact we want. So today, just a couple of questions to start off is, if is it sometimes difficult to explain your point of view in a conversation? So have you had this situations, or if you've been in a situation where the other people don't hear what you want to say? Um, or also maybe you want to figure out uh, in a context of a discussion, is it hard to grasp what's going on, or do you sometimes sense that people don't consider or are insensitive to your ways of working? So there will be times where you'll have all of these things coming up. And would you really want to know how you can change all this in the next 30 minutes? That's the context of why representational systems are important, and how it helps you to get that knowledge and the skills that you need for improving your communications. So we'll move on. I just wanted to recap because I talked about we're going to utilize everything that we have learned so far. Talked about NLP communication model, and I have the internal representation mentioned here, and that's going to play a big part in today's conversation. We talked about how an external event comes in through filters and creates an internal representation. That's kind of what the core is for today's session. But we talked about modalities and visual, auditory, kinesthetic, auditory, digital. This is one of the important concepts that we want to talk about in context of representational systems. I talked about eye patterns last time and how we use with eye people you move their eyes and figure out the uh, the thinking that is behind the eye, um, uh, the ways people are imagining things, right? Either they're creating or constructing or recalling. Um, let's talk about now representational systems. Now, what are these representational systems? Well, representation systems are basically made up of our modalities: the auditory, visual, kinesthetic. I gave a brief summary about it. It has those five things that based on our five senses, right? So what happens is representational systems actually provide us um, a meaning of what is going on in our mind, right? So you can use our mind actually stores everything. Any information that we're seeing outside, our mind will really store it, right? And it creates some kind of a pattern. That's what it means by brain code stores and gives meaning. So it creates some kind of a pattern based on our past experiences, based on our filters. It creates a pattern of thinking, and that's what our representation is. So when we are thinking about anything, it can be a sound, it can be a photograph or a picture, or it can be a feeling. Anything that happens, it creates a representation in our minds of the events that are going on. And that's basically what the representation system is all about. We're utilizing and understanding different people's representation systems, our own representation systems, gives us an opportunity to actually create that impact in our communication, create that visibility, creates that uh, sense of wisdom inside us. Okay, so when you're doing some conversations outside, you could actually see what is the real message that's coming out? Is it a message in terms of a picture? Is it a message in terms of a sound, or auditory? Is it a message in terms of feelings that are being shared, or is it some kind of an auditory digital monologue? Or it's not specified. So those kinds of things, you kind of able to get that information, and that's essentially what a representational system means, right? There are multiple there are representations. So understanding our own representation system is very critical to our communication. So if you normally always think about something, and what resonates with you, or what um, creates a picture in your head, or creates a feeling in your heart, um, or you kind of define it as a structure of step one, step two, step three. So this is kind of what I am talking about, is a representation of what is going on outside, how that is represented in your internal system, right? That's the internal representation we're talking about. And once that representation is created, it stays there. Now everybody has a preferred modality, the way they talk. So there'll be certain kinds of sentences, kinds of things you'll be doing, or saying, will be sharing, right? And in your natural language that you talk about. So that's because there is a representation that's favored or preferred for you, right? Now, once we start learning about these representation systems, very, very important thing is, it should not put people in a box. You should not put yourself in a box, saying if you have got a particular type of representation system, that doesn't mean that you can't use any other, right? So, and I'll talk about that a little bit more in the coming slides. But the essential message behind this is that what you need to understand is that a representational system, it provides an understanding or provides information for you about your own unconscious preference of your modality. It can create opportunities for you to know which ones that you need to go ahead and learn, right? So, and this reference is, you could probably find some in online, but normally what I do is, when I'm working one-on-one with my clients, I help them with this representational systems preference test, and there is a way you actually mark them and come back with numbers that provide you what's your representation, right? So a representational system would be preferred modality, right? For example, it would be a visual modality, or a auditory modality, or a kinesthetic modality. So sometimes people are very close to feelings. So for any, and it is normally in terms of a context. So if you're really feeling something about things, then your words or the language that you start using will be more feelings based. If you are really imagining things, and you're imagining in your mind in terms of pictures, then how you present that out will be, in the words that we'll start using will be more visual words. If you're listening to music, or you're thinking about anything somebody said, so what happens is, when you're talking about it, your words that will come out will be in terms of the sound, and auditory words. So that's the idea behind these representational systems. And how to determine your own, there is a test that's available, that I share with my clients. You may be able to find something online, you may not be, I don't know. I haven't, normally it is done in person, because it's important when a person gets the results, what are the details of the results, how to interpret the results. It is very personal, and personal in nature for every person. So something that has to be shared one-to-one, or in a specific specific class, face-to-face, about this one. So what you do is, once you understand where you stand, if you have a more visual representation, or you have a more auditory representation, or you have a more kinesthetic representation, um, you need to you can find out, okay, you will probably realize that you're able to understand a bit more about your own representation and how people talk to you. You can easily, so visual people are really able to get in rapport with other visual people. Auditory are able to get in rapport with other auditory people. Kinesthetic people are able to get in rapport with other kinesthetic people very closely. Now, there's a mismatch sometimes um, a boss might be a very visual person, but the peer or a subordinate might be very kinesthetic. So boss might be talking in terms of pictures, and the kinesthetic person will be just thinking, okay, my boss is in the clouds. He doesn't know what he's saying. I don't understand anything what he's saying, and it could be vice versa. So there are ways to deal with it. That's why you find, once you understand your own representational system or your own preferred modality, you and you I will talk about more about how you can identify what other people's more preferred modalities are. You can start using a different language to um, to share your information, to create rapport, create relationships, and really get to that next level of influencing. Right? Doesn't mean that if you have one preferred modality that you can't use the other ones. So I've specifically noted in my case, if I am more visual sometimes, I can start using more auditory words and more kinesthetic sometimes. So it depends on the context or state of mind, but preferred ones are the ones that you normally fall back on. Let's talk about a bit more about favored representation systems. If how do you understand if a person is visual, right? Now, remember, I talked about eye patterns last time, and I talked about how a person, if you're asking a person a question, his eyes go up, right? Now, if I could go back to that particular um, slide, if I look at this, if every time you talk to a person, is the person's eyes are naturally going up, it really means that the person is normally thinking in terms of pictures, right? Now, if the person talks in terms of pictures, what will happen is you will also see that those people are the ones who are do normally have a different kind of body language. Visual people will are the ones who often stand or sit with their heads or bodies really erect and their eyes up. Like they will normally have their eyes above the normal eye level, right? They will be breathing from top of their lungs. So if you use your sensory acuity and try and understand how they're breathing, you'll see that they're breathing very fast. So it will be fast breathing, and they'll normally straight very upright or in front of their chair, and they'll be very organized. So this is all general characteristics of visual people, and they'll most likely be very thin and wiry, or they'll be well dressed, well groomed, like in the previous point. And if you have to memorize something, they will be memorizing everything in terms of pictures. They don't get really distracted by noise. And some important thing is, if you give them verbal directions, their minds tend to wander. They start moving around, and they're not very comfortable with that. Now, if a visual person is interested in how something looks, so if you had to say, okay, hey, looks like, do you think, I can give you an example, right? Is uh, what do you think my dress looks like? Or what do you think my drawing looks like? Or what do you think my preparation looks like? So the word looks and is a very visual word, right? So they'll probably want you to see it and in terms of pictures, and if you can explain the words and whatever you want to say in terms of pictures to them, it will really get them to become more interested in you. If they are sitting very upright, what you can do by matching and mirroring is when you sit, you can actually go and sit upright with them, right? And that will immediately start creating rapport with you. So these are some of the things that you can really make use of. If I move on to auditory, now how do you find out if a person is auditory? First thing is you can look at their eyes, and whenever you're talking to them, their eyes are moving sideways. So they will go side, left or side. Subtly you can see whenever you're talking, their eyes are moving left or right rather than going up. Right? They breathe from the middle of the chest. So you'll probably be able to figure out that they're really talkative. And they keep talking a lot. The breathing will be a bit more down, so it'll not be very fast breathing, a bit slower, shallow, but it'll be you can see that their chest keeps going up and down from the middle to be faster. Now they typically talk to themselves, and they can be easily distracted by noise. So if you're trying to tell them something, and if there's another sound in the background, they'll be really very quickly distracted. Unlike visual people who won't be distracted, right? If you really use your sensory acuity and you talk to them, you might see, okay, they might be talking to themselves, their lips will be moving. So they will be doing that. You'll be able to figure out their auditory in their sense, right? And they'll repeat the words that you're saying, and they'll learn by listening. So they'll probably be listening to a lot of audios and music, and they really like to talk to someone on the phone, right? They will memorize steps and procedures and sequentially, right? Now, an auditory person likes to be told how they're doing and responds to certain tones of voice or set of words. So that means if you're, like I said, when I was talking about matching and mirroring, tonality of voice is one part of it, right? So if you find that a person is auditory, the tonality of voice. So if you want to be very gentle, or you can be very loud, or you can be very monologue. So those variations in the tonality of voice will make a difference on how the other person responds to you. And they will be generally interested in what you have to say about the program. So rather than looks, they will be interested in what you have to say. So they will ask you for feedback. Okay, what do you say about? So if you're looking at just for example, they might ask you for feedback on the way they are dressing, or they might ask you for feedback on their work. They will ask you to tell you about the things that are good, tell you about what's going on in their minds. So everything will be about telling rather than showing. That's auditory. And how you can figure out their auditory? Eye patterns is number one. Secondly, they will be very talkative. In general, you will know that they are very talkative. There are certain words that you will be utilizing, and I'll talk about that in the coming slides. When talk about kinesthetic, so kinesthetic are the people who are really in touch, close to their feelings, right? They have a very heavy voice, and they're a bit slower than visual and auditory people, right? And they typically breathe in and breathe out from bottom of their lungs. They're a heavy breather. So their stomach actually goes in and out when they're talking or when they're breathing. So if I have to talk to you as a kinesthetic, they will really they'll move slowly, and they will be talking very, very slowly. A good thing is that they will really like to be very close with you. They will like physical rewards like handshakes or a tap on the shoulder. Um, they are, if they have to stand in a meeting or in a discussion, they will want to be a bit more closer than the other people. So that's the idea. See, my tone of voice changed. I started breathing heavily. So that's kind of a real giveaway that the person is kinesthetic, right? They when they sit in the chairs, they are actually sitting way behind, and very relaxed, and deep breathing. And um, they will memorize things by doing or walking through something. So that's another thing that you will notice. And when you're talking about some things, they will ask you, does it feel right? Or did you grasp the situation? How did that feel to you? So those words relating, everything will be about feeling. So that's the idea behind these three types of representation systems. So most of the people fall into these three categories, but there are certain people who can use any of those three, and we call them as AD or unspecified. That specially means that these guys do a lot of self-talk, right? And they will try and create everything as a structure or a process, and they will find out if everything makes sense to them. And, and you'll probably hear this a lot with people is when you talk to them, they'll say, yes, that makes sense. So when they're mentioning that word, that at that point, the way they are thinking is more as an AD or an unspecified representation of their thinking, internal representation, and they're creating a process or a step. And how you notice this in a eye patterns, if a person normally looks down towards towards the towards the AD side, and that's where you will probably be able to let me show you. If I look at the diagram here, if the person is normally, as the person is looking at you, right, as a normally organized right-handed person, if they're normally looking down towards this side, towards your right when they're looking at them, and whenever you're talking, they're always looking down. So that's where unspecified comes into the picture. And for them, context is very important. If they're always looking down, then you can think in terms of steps or processes, or they need to understand or think, those kinds of things. So it needs to make sense to them. There needs to be some guidelines of what will be the starting point, what will be the end point. So when you're doing your conversations, you can create those steps, and they will be really engaged, right? So that's the idea behind unspecified. Now, what are the various words that you can actually utilize? So this list that I have shared here is basically a list of words that visual people use a lot, auditory use a lot, and kinesthetic use a lot. And if you can memorize this list or get some of the words, and when other person is talking to you, if you can listen to some of the words and figure out, okay, is this person talking to me in terms of pictures, or in terms of sounds, or in terms of feelings, then you can actually relate it, and you can utilize these predicates and and start having your conversation. It will really make a difference. For example, um, I can say my point of view. In my point of view, what you are doing um, paints a picture that is beautiful. Now, I've used some of the visual words, and a kinesthetic person, if you're talking to that same thing, a kinesthetic person will say, oh, I have no idea, because I can't feel anything from your words. And you're, as a visual person, you keep saying, hey, it does paint a picture. Can't you see the kinesthetic person says this? Hey, come on, can you start from scratch? I just don't understand what's going on, right? I don't know. It doesn't feel good to me. I need to get a feel of it. I need to get a hold of it. Um, I can't grasp what you're saying. Now, you see, the words that kinesthetic person is using are totally different than a word that visual person is using, and when they're talking to each other, nobody can relate. They're not really able um, to get the conversation going. So now what you could do is, if that other person is talking only in terms of feelings, you can probably start talking to him or her in that kinesthetic, with using those kinesthetic words, and you'll start seeing a lot of benefits, right? A very good example that I can, so the same thing you can, if I'll let me give you an example of one sentence that you can say in all the three different modalities. For example, and it's mentioned at the bottom, if I show you an attractive way in which you could do something that's beneficial, would at least want to look at it, wouldn't you? If this looks good to you, we will go ahead and focus on getting the paperwork in. Now that's visual. Now the same thing, if I had to talk about the same thing in an auditory way, say, if I could tell you a way in which you could find the benefits, you would at least want to hear about it, wouldn't you? If this sounds good, would you would you be able to go ahead and discuss how to set up an account? Or in a kinesthetic, if I could help you get hold of a concrete way in which you could get these benefits, you would at least want to get a feel for it, wouldn't you? If this feels good to you, we can go ahead and set up an account, and by handling the paperwork. So you use the tone of your voice, you use the words, and you utilize everything you've learned in the last couple of sessions and get the communication going. That's the idea, right? So understanding, finding out from eye patterns and the words that the other person uses, using your sensory acuity, looking at the other person's body language, how they sit, how they talk, how they breathe. You can get a sense, get an idea of the representation system that they are showing in front of you, and based on that, you could actually match and mirror, and you can use these words and get your communication really effective. Now, how do we use this information? I'm just talking about, you keep the list of predicates that I shared with you. Either you keep it in front of you or you memorize them, whatever helps you, right? Use eye patterns, listen to specific keywords in the other person's language, like I just said. Determine which modality or rep system they are accessing, and utilize the same keywords as in the predicate list. Create rapport and ecological relationships. Remember, ecology is number one in any of the techniques that we're sharing here, and you can get the results you want. That's all I had to share today. Any questions?
I have a question, Chandra. Can one person be auditory and kinesthetic at the same time? Then how would you work with that?
If you're auditory and kinesthetic at the same time, at any point in time, you can either be one modality or the other. You can't be showing both modalities. So if you feel, or if you think the person is kinesthetic more or auditory more, you can utilize keywords from both and figure out if you are able to get the communication going, which one helps you get the results. Right? So you have the predicate list. You can trial one or trial other. The idea is to create rapport, and get the other person to understand what you're trying to say. So utilize both if you have to, and get the results and find out. So sometimes it is trial and error, because everybody, based on the context, they can show one or more modalities. but preferred modality is normally 1. Did I answer your question?
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. So at a
Hello,
time.
Chandar. Hello, Chandar. Just my one
Yes.
question is there.
Yes.
Is it that our modality depends on with a person whom we are talking? So, like if I am talking with my boss and I am talking with my subordinates, our representative system will be differ.
It is context dependent, but normally our preferred or favored representation systems are the same. They don't change.
Okay.
There was another question. Okay. Did I answer your question? Sorry. Okay.
Yes, yes. Thank you, Chandra.
Thank you. There was another question. Okay. So if there are no other questions, I will finish off the session. So next session, we are going to talk about more about how do we use language, the actual words we speak, and how do we interpret, and some of the assumptions or presuppositions that we can use in our language to get more information from about the context, and also some suggestions we can provide to people to get more information, get the results we want. So please stay tuned for the next session next Sunday.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you all. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks.